Hi, everyone. I just want to see if you can hear me out there. I don't hear anything, so I just want to, maybe someone can say something so I can see if I hear you. Thank you.
I can hear you.
Thanks, Don. Nice to see you in a box.
Welcome, everyone. Roll call, please, Ellie.
Trustee McAvoy,
Present?
Trustee Wells,
Here.
Trustee Lawson,
Here.
Vice President Marquez,
Here.
President Diaz-Locum.
Present. Sorry. That's hybrid meetings, you know. Welcome, everyone. Once again, if you'd like to speak to the board, we'd love to hear from you. In person, you can fill out a speaker's card. If you're at home, please fill out the Google Doc online. We do provide translation. If you need translation, please let us know. If you're speaking to the board, we give 3 minutes and 6 minutes if needed for translation. If you want to speak on any of the consent items, please let us know because we vote on all those at simultaneously. So we need to pull it off if you're interested in that. And if you could please silence your electronic devices if you're here in person. Okay, Elisa is remotely this evening. So I hope we can hear her as well. I think everything was working well. Now, let's see, do we have any changes or deletions to the agenda this evening? None? Okay, can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in, oh, Elisa's not here. Roll call, Ellie.
Trustee McAvoy,
Yes.
Trustee Wells,
Aye.
Trustee Lawson,
Aye.
Vice President Marquez,
Aye.
President Diaz-Locum.
Aye. Do we have any oral communication this evening?
We do. We have a speaker's card from Sue Jorgensen.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I want to address the some of the librarian concerns that we have. I understand that Kyle's position has been eliminated, and it's left us kind of rudderless. There has been no plan that's been put forth, and I'm sure that a plan will be, but just some in context, we have had 9 district supervisors, 3 district librarians, and 1 county librarian in order to stay in compliance. And I know several of us are the ones that informed our principals that that position was being eliminated. I'm finding the lack of communication very disheartening. I know that my colleagues from Temp have already had a meeting to start the plan. It leaves a lot of anxiety and just real unease. We haven't seen any board members at libraries this year feeling very neglected stepchild in our department of 11 people. And despite the fact that we touch each child in the district life, we've never felt really important, including that we now have a district librarian who has been in 3 meetings, maybe a total of an hour. And that's a contract that's not being followed. And I'd really appreciate some follow-up on what is the state of the librarians and how are we doing? Because not that well. Once more, it feels like the rug's been pulled out. Kyle actually gave us some stability and we're just left with a great unknown again. Extremely disappointed. And I'm sure we'll all pull ourselves together because we always do and give it our all. But this is a very disappointing year and how this all transpired. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other speakers?
That is the end of speakers cards.
Moving along to school and community reports, we are on item 6.1, the 2022 bond measure feasibility survey results.
Yes, good evening, everyone. And so this evening we have Brian Godby from Godby Research and Joy Coomer from TBWBH, who will address the school board with a presentation which will showcase the key findings from a recent bond measure feasibility polling survey conducted within the Redwood City community. During this time, while Mr. Godby and Ms. Coomer are giving their presentations, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. And then I'm hoping that we will have a discussion. So I will get direction on where to move forward with or with not putting this item on the November ballot. So Brian, I believe you are with us, right?
Yes, I am.
There he is.
Superintendent Baker, thank you. I will share my screen. Everybody should be able to see it now and hear me okay. So I will just jump right in. As we've done in the past for the school district, we conducted a survey where we looked at a variety of different things. We started with some climate questions, perceptions in general about the district. That included perceptions of the COVID situation. It included quality of education, how the perceptions of managing taxpayer funds, and whether the district needs additional funding. We looked specifically at support for a hypothetical bond measure, and you'll see that a couple times in here. We looked at a variety of different projects and programs that might be funded with the proceeds from the bond measure. We tested the influence of informational statements on potential support. And of course, there's a wealth of demographic and behavioral characteristics that we used initially to validate that the survey is a representative of the likely universe that we're looking at, but it also helps us with segmentation and other issues. Excuse me. In terms of the methodology, this was an online and a phone survey, which of course means that we call landlines and cell phones. Excuse me. And we also did text invitations and email invitations to an online survey. Online for us does not mean a link on Facebook or on your website. It's people who are in our voter sample that we specifically contact and give them a link to a website where the survey is served to them. The university we were looking at was November 2022 voters. We were in the field in the beginning of February or middle of February, really, to the end of February. The average survey was 22 minutes long. The total sample size was 508, which gives us a margin of error of plus or minus 4.31%. Moving into the findings, like I said, the first section was kind of what the background is in the district. And we asked, do you have a favorable or unfavorable rating of how the district is assessing the COVID crisis? And the first question is just that. If you add the variance somewhat together, we're at 50% favorable versus 16% unfavorable. It's about a 3.2 to 1 positive to negative ratio. But there's a big chunk of don't knows over here. Don't know, no answer actually is what that stands for. And that's about 35%. And when I looked at those more specifically, what jumps out right away is that with parents, the don't know is only 17%. So they have a much more grounded opinion about the district's handling, but non-parents, the don't know is 50%. So a big chunk of that 35 is people who don't have a day-to-day experience with the district. The next question was a favorable, unfavorable rating of the district, the job the district's doing to provide quality education. And again, we add the variance somewhat together. You see we're at 53% favorable. That compares with the 2019 survey that we did, which was of the November 2020 likely voter universe, where it was substantially lower. It was only 32%. So things have improved the perception of the quality of education in the district. The next was the perception of managing taxpayer funds. And the same thing is true here. Things have gone certainly up since we did that 2019 survey of the 2020 November likely voters. We're at 37% favorable now. We were at 27%, so it's a 10-point pickup. In both cases, there's big don't knows. And that's important because these are all likely voters that we're looking at for November 2022. And that tells you that we have some work to do to explain what the district's been doing to be a good steward of taxpayer money, because those people, obviously, if we're going to ask them to vote on a measure that increases their taxes, they need to know you're doing a good job with the money they're currently getting. The next question asked if people believe that you needed additional money to do your job. Again, adding the somewhat and strongly together here, you see 61% agree that you do need additional money versus 25% that disagree, and a 2.44 to 1 positive to negative ratio. There's a smaller don't know here. It's only 15%. But again, since these are all likely voters, there's some work to do that to make sure that everybody understands what your needs are. Now, the next question is where we started talking about specific language for a bond measure. And you can see that in the box on the right-hand side of the slide. It meets all of the state legal requirements for a ballot question. It's 75 words. It has how much the bonds would be, $298 million. It has the tax rate that would be levied to repay those bonds. And it also shows the amount that the tax rate would raise per year. And then it has a term, which is while bonds are outstanding. All of those are required by state law. And so that's why they're in there. Then the bullets are those things that we might spend the money on. This is obviously a summary. It's not your entire facilities master plan. That obviously couldn't fit in a 75-word statement, which we're limited again by state law. So it has to be sort of a high-level summary. When we add the definitely yes and probably yes together, we get 62% that support. Obviously, a Prop 39 bond measure requires 55% majority. And so this is with our 4.5% margin of error. We exceed the 55%, even when we take into account the plus or minus, particularly the minus side of that error. And that's a pretty good place to start, since all they know is what's in this 75-word statement. You can see we're about 30% that are saying that definitely no or probably no, and about 9% that don't know. So the follow-up questions were started with features of the measure. And basically, this is a random list of things we might spend the money on. And so everybody got all of these items in a different order. And then we come back when we're done with the interviewing and we rank them based on a scale, which is, you see across the bottom, much more likely is a 2, somewhat more likely is a 1, somewhat less likely is a -1, and much less likely is a -2. And it creates this scale here. It's a really accurate way of ranking these items, but it's also important to look at the range of percentages that are much more likely plus somewhat more likely. So that sort of puts it into context of the 55% threshold that we need to be successful. We also look at what we call tiers, and those are basically statistical groupings. So if you apply that plus or minus 4.5%, you'll see that this range of percentages is within the margin of error. And basically things in this top tier are all tied, but there are some numeric differences, and that's important, particularly as we're crafting a ballot question going forward that would actually be on the ballot. At the top of the list, we have upgrade and repair science, technology, engineering, arts, math, classrooms, and labs. Is number 1. That's about 73%, at least somewhat more likely to support the measure. Build new science labs for 21st century learning is second, just a little bit behind. Fix and replace deteriorating roofs. Provide dedicated classrooms for music, art, and performing arts. Upgrade inadequate HVAC systems. Provide, bring all schools up to the same standard, and update aging student restrooms and plumbing systems. So another kind of systems kind of thing like the HVAC. And all of those are above 67%, at least somewhat more likely to support the measure. So well above the 55% threshold necessary to pass a bond measure. The next slide continues tier 1, and you can see it's still about the same level, 67% or above. There's some variation because of the way the ranking works, but it's all basically the same. We have ensure safe access to all schools for disabled students, upgrade classroom computers and classroom technology, and make classrooms more sustainable, including updating air conditioning, HVAC filtration, and installing solar panels and storage batteries. From there, we go into tier 2, which are still all positive, but you can see just by looking at the percentages here that we start at 67, but we go down to 58 really pretty fast. So by the time we get to the bottom of this slide, we're really approaching the 55% threshold. So while these things are important, obviously, in any facilities master plan, they are of limited utility in terms of, convincing the voters that the measure is a good idea. They're just not the voters' priorities. The next set of questions was a similar methodology, but this is a little bit more informational rather than listing what we're going to spend the money on. So there are things like accountability provisions that are included in this list, but the methodology is largely the same. And so when we look at the percentages over here on the far right, you see we're in the low 70s for all of this top tier, which is good. All the money raised by the measure will be controlled locally, will go to our local schools and cannot be taken away by the state. Some of the district schools are more than 96 years old and need to be modernized to provide up-to-date classroom technology. The measure would provide real-world hands-on science, technology, engineering, arts, and math classrooms. None of the money raised by the measure will be used for administrator salaries. The measure requires independent citizens' oversight. And even if you do not have school-age children, it's a good investment in maintaining the quality of life in our community. And the measure upgrades classrooms to support core academics, instruction in math, science, reading, and writing. All of those are pretty strong reasons to support the measure. Again, the next slide shows the remainder of the items, the remainder of tier 1. The measure will recognize our school, or the measure will modernize our schools so they support science, technology, engineering, math. The district has $400 million in identified needs. And then we dip into the second tier, which again, by the time we get to the bottom, well, it's above the margin of error and the 55% threshold. Obviously, it's not as strong as those things at the top of the list. So the next question we have in the presentation is the interim support. After people have heard all that information, we started at 62% and then we jump up to 68%. So that tells you that as people become more aware of the measure and what it would do, they're more supportive of it. We then asked a few other questions and come back to a final test. But at that final test, we're at 63%, a little bit lower than the middle test, but it's still above where we started. And again, with a 4.5% margin of error, this could be as low as 58.5, 59, which still gives us a cushion above the 55% threshold that we need to be successful for the measure. So that's the presentation that I have for this evening. Joy has some slides as well, but I'm happy to answer any survey questions you might have before turning it over to Joy.
Does anyone have any questions or not yet? Elisa, do you have any questions?
No, thank you. Janet and I were on the committee that helped with the bond feasibility study, so we were able to ask some questions earlier. It makes sense to me. Thank you, Brian.
Sure.
Okay, so I guess keep going, Brian.
Okay, so I'll turn it over to Joy now to go through her slide.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I am Joy Coomer with Props and Measures. We've worked with the district many times over the years on previous bond and parcel tax measures, and I'm happy to be back tonight visiting with you about the survey results and what this could mean for a potential bond measure moving forward. So this first slide here is taking a look at the timeline that we have overall. You know, we started visiting with the district back in December and had started talking about a potential bond measure, looking at all of the different projects that the district had, including from the facilities master plan and things that needed to be done at various school sites and other projects around the district. That's what prompted the survey results. And I would say that those survey results, even considering looking back at previous bond measures, are well in line with you know, being able to say we would recommend that you could consider moving forward with a bond on November 8th of 2022. So this timeline takes a big picture look at that. So right now we really are at the exploring feasibility stage. We've been, you know, working on that voter survey. We're considering the timing. For those of you who may not know, the district can only go out for GO bonds in even years. It has to be during a regularly scheduled election. That's what gives you the opportunity to do a Prop 39 bond, which requires that you only need 55% per passage. So, you know, we're not quite to we've missed June. But we were always looking at this November 8th of 2022. So if not this November, the next opportunity would not be until 2024. The bond amount, we worked with the advisors of the district. That was what was tested in the survey. The district is allowed to go up to $30 per 100 of assessed valuation as an elementary school district. However, we felt like the needs and knowing what we know about working in your district in the past, that $24 amount was a more comfortable amount that would allow the district to accomplish some of the things that you have identified, but not reach the full amount that you would be eligible for. We're also looking ahead at a November election, and I'm happy to visit with the board if there are questions that come up about the November election. I think one of the things that we have learned over the last couple of years is that things change a lot. And we are definitely heading into where I think people are feeling, although there are worldwide concerns that weigh heavy, people are feeling optimistic right at the present time about the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think that as we saw last year, people will be, you know, more active in summer, but we can't really predict what the fall will be like. And so I just put that out there. This survey is a picture in time of how voters feel right now. And so we think it's a good indication of where voters are at. You have usually tracked very closely to your voters in the past. However, next fall is a long ways away, especially as we've been dealing with the pandemic. We are at that point where feasibility does look possible for November. And the board doesn't have to make a choice about whether to put something on the ballot or not until August 12th. August 12th is the last day that the district can qualify for the November 8th ballot. And that means that you have to have voted on a resolution and it has to have been turned in by the Register of Voters in order to get to that November 8th ballot. So what do we do between now and August 12th? Well, there is still a lot of work to do. There is non-advocacy communication to the community, going out and continuing to do outreach and communication to inform the community about the district's plans. And that can ultimately help the district decide whether this is a right time or not. We also would need to write the resolution and develop the project list with the district. All of those things would be planned out over the next few months. And I think my following slide sort of shows that in a little bit more. Once the board votes on August, before that August 12th deadline, that's when it moves into the advocacy campaign. And as many people sort of think about campaigns, that's where those things are done by a separate group from the district, because the district can't advocate for the bond measure once you voted. So that is private fundraising. They are the ones who do the mail, the precinct walks, getting the endorsements, all of the things that we equate with asking people to vote yes on the ballot measure. So I think I broke it out a little bit more detail on the following slide. Maybe I just put this slide in for your discussion tonight. Oh, nope, there we go. Recommended next steps. So here we are towards the end of March. We are right now reviewing those survey results. And we're really at the point where what we're asking the board to do is to have a discussion and say, should we keep moving forward looking at November? And again, the ultimate decision does not have to be made until August 12th, though it'll have to be during a regular board session before August 12th, obviously. But do we at least keep going forward to decide whether November 22 is a good time or not? If the board decides to move forward, what we will do is we'll create informational communications with the district to talk about facility needs and what would be available to the district, specifically this GO bond, to help address those facility needs. In April and May, we would send some mail to the community. We would ask them to continue to engage in the conversation, provide their input, share information about this, and really do a lot of that external outreach, talking to community leaders, visiting with key stakeholders, and making sure that this is the right time. We would then come back to the district. We'll work on the project list and the resolution with your committee. And then sometime before that August 12th deadline, we would come back to the board and discuss whether we think it's the right time to move forward and place a measure on the November 2022 ballot. So that is the timeline. We do feel like the survey results are indicative of a successful bond measure on the November ballot. But again, happy to field or answer any questions that the board might have. And certainly Brian can answer more questions about the survey as well.
So do we have any questions or comments at this point? Mike?
Yeah, thanks. I think my big question, Joy just addressed a bunch of it, was what do these results indicate? It sounds like they indicate likely successful, but it's not a strong indication there. But it does seem like, in my opinion, that it does say that moving forward is not a bad move to make right now. I think if I remember right from our previous discussions, part of the work ahead of us, we can rely on the facilities master plan to help inform some of that, to sort of ease the burden of the work ahead. Is that correct? Did I have that right?
Yes, many of the projects would be identified through your facilities master plan and any other updates to help guide that. To guide the project list that is included in the resolution. But there are things that will allow you to do different things that you need around the district. It isn't just those items, and we would continue to work with the district to identify and make sure that we're not missing something.
So Mike, to add to that, there is a facilities master plan. And as of right now, we are 1/3 through it with the first go around with the bond. Dawn is on this call, and Dawn is very much aware of the other 2/3 of it that has items which we were unable to accomplish at this point in time. So it would be to our advantage to really look at that facilities master plan, determine with school sites what items are there that they would like to see come to fruition. So it would take us some time to do that. I would definitely work very closely with Dawn, and we would work very closely with the bond team at the same time to do this, and then come back to you with those items, and also during our weekly meeting, give you an update of where we are on each of those items, on the other 2/3 that still we have to do that, and we have to do, and we don't have the money to do it with right now.
Yeah, so hearing that there's 2/3 more of a master's plan, that the initial survey, the initial findings say that indicates it would be positive. We're not really deciding to go ahead yet. We don't have all the information. To me, it kind of makes sense to continue.
Anyone else?
So my question would be, we've done this survey and, it looks appealing. Now, what happens? Is there going to be another survey? I'm looking at the timeline and I don't see that. And so I just would like some clarification as to how would we then determine if we will move forward with it?
Sure. So the district can always decide to do what's often called the tracking survey. And we may do that closer to when the board would vote. It would give you an indication whether opinions in the community have changed one way or another. I will say that these results, although they are not, perfectly matched for many reasons to your previous bond measure, the support is similar to what we had seen before, which sort of indicates that, the community understands that the district has needs and there are needs to repair and update facilities, and that, right, again, the language of the bond question has changed. There are things, so we can't compare it apples to apples, but we can say we're still in the fruit bowl. And so I do see some consistency. That said, there are external factors that are beyond the district's control, right? If inflation were to really go up, or the stock market were to really go down, these are things that could change people's appetite for moving forward. It's not that they don't think these projects are important or that the district needs to do them. It just may mean that they're feeling different about their financial security. And so that could change some results. So a survey, a tracking survey could be conducted again in late May or early June. There would be a cost to that as well. Some of our external communications will also be, tracking that community pulse. It will not be scientific, but it will help us understand if there are some shifting things that are happening in the community that might change whether November is a good time or not. And I'll let Brian sort of, visit a little bit about a tracking survey as well.
Yeah, and I would just add to what Joyce said. Normally, if we did a survey like we did this one by the end of February, we probably wouldn't consider a tracking survey. And I'm not one to, well, I'm in the survey business, but I'm still not one to jump to say we need to do a tracking survey 2 months later in normal situations. This might be a little bit different because of world events, because of COVID, and because of the inflation. It seems to be growing, but I think that's largely driven by world events right now. We just need to be a little flexible, I think. And if the war in Ukraine ends in the next month, then things will probably be okay, and we won't need to do a tracking survey. If things go south, then maybe we need to think about that.
Janet or Lisa, do you have any additional comments or questions?
So I don't have any questions. As Elisa mentioned, we were on the committee that reviewed all this already, so we had a chance to ask our questions. I think my comments would be, in 2015, when we went out for Measure T, we knew that in order to, do the full facilities master plan, we were going to need more money, and that we would only get a third of our projects done. So we know that we need that money to complete our master plan. And knowing that we can only do an election in an even year, I have concerns about pushing it to 2024, particularly because we know that it will take even more years after that for the projects to even start. So I think if we push it to 2024, we're looking at, another 5-6 years before we can even be working on our projects. So I think it makes sense to move forward with 2022.
Yeah, Janet, thank you for, thanks, Maria. Yeah, so just to add to what Janet said, I totally agree with everything she just said. Also, as we all know, in addition to the existing facilities master plan that we have that we used back for Measure T, we know that there has been other school facilities and other facilities needs that have come forward to us the last several years that are high priorities for the district. And so we did poll on some of those things, and those are listed in what Brian went over. And so I think it's important for us to also add that into the mix. So just, it even makes more of a case for moving forward sooner than later, because we know we already had needs back from 2015 when we passed the first measure, and we even have more now. And I totally agree. I think waiting another 2 years is just too long. The only other kind of detail I wanted to add to it that I know we talked about in the committee, as well as I followed up with Dr. Baker about this, is that when we look at our calendar for regularly scheduled board meetings, which is when we would need to take action with the resolution and the project list and all of that, assuming that we continue to move forward, it's by August 12th. We have a regularly scheduled board meeting August 10th, which cuts it really close. That only gives a 2-day buffer. So we were talking about probably wanting to try to do this by June 29th, which is our last June meeting, regularly scheduled June meeting. So I just bring that to everyone's attention. I know that Dr. Baker already knows that. And I think, Dr. Baker, you can speak to this, but I think you felt comfortable in talking with Dawn that we could get out to the school sites, have the bond committee review the project list, all of that, and that it still gives us enough time to actually put together what we need. But maybe you can just speak to that as well.
Sure, we're very fortunate, to have Dawn with us and also the bond team. So that's the timeline that I would be working on, a timeline starting from right after spring break and probably up until mid-May, so that everything would be in place to bring back to you on the 29th to give you an update, the board meeting prior to that, so that you know where we are, what questions to ask, and then that following board meeting on the 29th to make the decision, to approve or not approve. If we're approving, the resolution will be done and also be approved at that meeting.
Yeah, and the timing also gives us enough opportunity to get out to school sites, to talk to the Redwood City Education Foundation, to talk to our business groups and things like that, and just let them know what we're looking at. And I think, Joy, this is fine to do, right? That we're basically factually sharing information with the community. We'll start to get feedback on that, and that will also help inform our decision making on behalf of our school district by June, into June.
Yes, that is correct. I will also say that I had an opportunity to talk with the district's attorney, Janet Mueller, and she also did say that she felt comfortable. I mean, again, I think that ultimately it would be at the board's discretion, but she said If you felt that you wanted to wait to that August 10th date, but have an earlier discussion about the projects and moving forward so that you could accommodate things like a tracking survey, she felt that the 2 days, would be an opportunity as well. That, we could do enough work at the prior board meeting in June, and then, just approve the resolution on the 10th and be ready to move forward. So I do think we have some flexibility there. But ultimately, we'll go with your timeline and where you feel comfortable. I know sometimes only having 2 days seems tight, but I do think in this circumstance, because we have those June meetings, that we can do some of the early work on and just approve the resolution on the 10th. That also work. I feel confident that that would as well.
So from my perspective, I think the rest of the projects need to be completed. I think we should hold on the tracking survey, and I think we should try and do it by November of 2022 for several reasons, not only because it needs to be done, but also the cost of materials keeps increasing. So being good stewards of the funds for the community would be better if we went sooner than later. So are we all in agreement then to continue with the process moving forward? Yes, okay. So we're all in favor of moving forward.
All right, so what I will do after spring break is to sit down with Joy, and I just want to come up with a timeline with Joy. I also like to have Dawn at the meeting with me, and maybe Dawn, if Will could be there, if you think that he is the person that should be one at this meeting to give us information, especially for us to really look very carefully at that master plan and what items are done, what items still need to occur. And then I can develop the timeline to go out to the school sites and get information from the school sites of hopefully of what they're also hoping for. That is in the master plan right now. Then my question, Dawn, for you is, I know with the architect, are we going to have to get the architect involved in this?
Not in this phase.
Okay.
No.
All right, perfect. All right. All right.
Okay, well, thank you, guys. And I guess we'll be in touch.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
I'll call you.
Thank you very much.
Bye, Joe and Brian. And moving right along with item 6.2, the bond program update.
Good evening, everyone. Roger's going to help me with, assist me with the photos. So he has the slideshow here. And this is the pictures of the photos at the site. First one you're looking at, this is Garfield, which is a 2-story classroom building and a library with an amphitheater. Another picture of Garfield, you can see the circular up front, that is the library, and then the amphitheater is on the left. This is the roadway going in, combination fire lane, and also the road that goes to the rear parking lot that we're putting on. This is the back, looking at the building from the ball field out to the main building that was built in 1926. This is a picture of Orion Alternative from the top of the library. This is a 2-story classroom building, as well as a new entranceway from the street. This is another photo in the back, shows the sitting area, a little smaller amphitheater. This is looking at it from a different angle. This is from the main building. And this is Taft. So this is looking at it from 10th Avenue. Taft is a 2-story classroom building, a library, and a new entrance to get into the site off 10th. There's another shot from the new parking lot that shows the building and also shows the quad area with the amphitheater. There's a good shot of the amphitheater on the second floor. And you can see the new structure on the bottom left. That's the covered walkway that gets you to the new entrance area. So there is a cover that allows them to, in inclement weather, be covered. And this is the new parking lot at Taft. And this is the facilities yard at 601 James. This is the EV chargers for the buses. You can see the electric buses there. The first 4 buses there from the bottom are the electric buses. And here in the back, that is the new transformer and the new switchgear that powers up those electric vehicle chargers, which is done anytime you do put in EVs or its own separate transformer and power station. This is the outdoor learning quad at Hoover. It's about 50% complete. I think that's it. Yep, that's the end of our slideshow on what's happening out there in the field.
Wow, looks wonderful. It's amazing to see those buildings just go up. Oops, sorry. It's amazing to see all those buildings go up. Looks wonderful. Thank you, Dawn.
Yeah, we're almost there.
Anyone else want to comment?
So just Dawn, are you getting closer to the dates of when the completion is going to be? Is it getting closer?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's hard at the end. I liken it to a baseball analogy where you got a great starting pitcher and then you better have a good closure to close the deal, because there's a lot of things that go on at the end. And that's what we're dealing with right now, but we'll make it work. We're looking at mid-April for Taft and May for both Gill and Garfield.
Very good. Thank you.
Orion and Garfield, pardon me.
Thanks, Dawn.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so now moving on to the bond program consent items. Can I have a motion to move those items, please?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Roll call, Lily?
Trustee McAvoy,
Aye.
Trustee Wells,
Aye.
Trustee Lawson,
Aye.
Vice President Marquez,
Aye.
President Diaz-Loca.
Aye. And there is no action items on the bond programs. Moving on to the consent items. Can I have a motion to move that?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, Lily?
Trustee McAvoy,
Aye.
Trustee Wells,
Aye.
Trustee Lawson,
Aye.
Vice President Marquez,
Aye.
President Diaz-Loca.
Aye. And now on to action items. 10.1, recommendation regarding information regarding the teacher residency program for special education teachers with San Mateo County Office of Ed and Alder Graduate School of Education.
Thank you. So tonight I bring forward to you an opportunity for the district to help with the attracting and retaining of special ed teachers specifically. As you know, across the county, perhaps even across the state, this has been an obstacle because we don't have as many teachers entering education in general, but then in this particular area has been a barrier. So I'm excited for this great opportunity for a residency program for special education teachers. We actually have mentors who are interested. When we have 2 potential candidates that saw this on the board agenda and reached out to us. So that is really exciting. I do want to thank Erin Keikos, the Director of HR, for being a leader in this area. She's done a great job working with Alder and learning about the program to bring to you tonight. So the details are in the memo. It is a 1-year program that would allow for a master's and a credential. So it is an intense program. And there is a commitment. And then there's also training for the mentor, and the candidate can also be a substitute for that particular mentor when absent for these trainings. So anyway, it's an exciting time, and I am here to answer any questions regarding this opportunity.
Any comments or questions?
Actually, I do have a question just from what you just said. What is the commitment?
For the candidate?
Yes.
So it's a 1-year commitment where the individual will be taking classes intensely in the evening and then being in the classroom working with the mentor teacher every day. So it's hands-on, it's student teaching at a whole nother level while learning along the way and getting to know our district with hopefully the intention of hiring the individual at the end of the program.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Oh, there you are.
I had a question. Yeah. Thank you, Wendy. Well, first of all, I'm super excited about this program. It's very much grow your own that we've talked about, and looking for folks in our own community who know the cost of living and have a support system here, hopefully, that can help them live here and work here, be in our community. One question I had was, who's the final decision maker on who gets to be in the program for us? Is it our district, or is it the San Mateo County Office of Ed, or do you do that together? If you could just speak to that, that would be helpful.
So the county is involved in the sense that they are assisting districts with the relationship with Alder and providing space for the classes. But each district is working on recruiting potential candidates with assistance and wisdom from Alder that have been doing this work for quite some time. So we do feel like we have a lifeline, we have some good guidance as we move forward, but it involves community sessions with potential candidates, advertising, and so forth to get the candidates in place and to learn about the program and then eventually commit. The goal is for the individuals to be affiliated with Redwood City or live in Redwood City and be part of the district, hopefully long-term.
Yeah, and I think it's just great because it allows people who wouldn't otherwise be able to do it actually go through a program like this, because as we all know, it's very costly for you to quit your job, go into a credentialing program, or even into some more regular internship program. And this really helps subsidize some of that cost. So yeah, I think it's just great. So thank you for working with the San Mateo County Office of Ed on it.
So can I have a clarifying question? So with that said, where did I go? Because I got lost. So the purpose of this program is to attract and retain special ed teachers. And then it says, we are hopeful that we will be able to hire now, but there is no commitment after the 1 year of them getting their credential and masters to actually stay in Redwood City for a period of time.
We reserve that right to make that determination at the end. But what we have found is that in our previous practice, our student teachers who get to know the district on a much more a familiar level. They're involved in our professional development. They get to know the administrators and the feel of the district, and are usually drawn towards opportunities with us. So we would probably be intentionally talking to them very early, but we want it to be a win-win decision for both parties.
I'll just say I think it sounds like a great program. I'm glad that we're putting it together. Like Elisa said, the Grow Your Own is a great strategy. And I also just wanted to thank you for answering some of the questions I had about how it's experienced in the classroom for when there are mentee takeover days, which are co-planned with the mentor and well-planned. And it's also sort of a, when the mentor is out for development or for additional training, both around the program and I guess for anything else, the mentee is right there to be able to, sub for the classroom instead of bringing in a sub that may not be as familiar. So that sounds like a big win in my mind too. So sounds like a great program.
Okay, if there are no more questions or comments, can I have a motion to move this item?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, roll call, Ellie.
Trustee McAvoy,
Aye.
Trustee Wells,
Aye.
Trustee Lawson,
Aye.
Vice President Marquez,
Aye.
President Diaz-Solcom.
Aye. Okay, moving on to 10.2, recommendation regarding approval of personnel report. Do we have any comments or questions from board members? Lisa? You okay? No, okay. Can I have a
I'm
motion?
good, thank you. Yeah, it looked good for me.
Can I have a motion?
Wendy answered my questions through email already. I'll make a motion to approve it.
Okay,
And I'll second it.
okay. Roll call, Ellie?
Trustee McAvoy,
Aye.
Trustee Wells,
Aye.
Trustee Lawson,
Aye.
Vice President Marquez,
Aye.
President Diaz-Solcom.
Aye. And now on to 10.3, recommendation regarding approval of the 2021-22 second interim budget report for Redwood City School District. Priscilla's here.
Yes, she is.
Yes,
Okay.
good evening. Good evening, everyone. I would like to present to you my PowerPoint slides for the second interim report. So let me open that real quick. Can everybody see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
So again, we are now again the time to submit the second interim report to the County Office of Ed. And as you know, the adopted budget is updated twice in a year, one for first interim, which the board just approved in December. And now we are presenting the second interim update, which is the budgetary status of the district as of January 31. So again, we are also including here the two multi-year projections for the 22-23 and 23-24 fiscal year. And for this report, we continue to recommend a positive certification for our financial status, which means that we will be able to meet our financial obligations for the current year and the next 2 years. So a lot of the planning factors that we use at first interim remains the same, including the projection for enrollment and attendance. So I am discussion of this is exactly the same as what we have at first interim. So in this summary, these are all the planning factors that we use for the second interim. The ones that don't have red items in them are substantially the same as first interim. So for example, I mentioned to you the enrollment and average daily attendance is the same. The significant change here at second interim is the cost of living adjustment or COLA. And this is the one that is included in the state's January proposal. So there are three items that have significant change in our planning factors. One of them is the COLA, and then the CSEA settlement, and then the CPI. And I'm gonna go over what is the impact of that in our multi-year projection. So on the COLA, because we are a basic aid district, there's no impact on us. As you can see on the 22-23, there is a significant increase from 2.48% at first interim to 5.33%. And then on the 23-24, from 3.11% to 3.61%. So what does this mean? It's just, it's detrimental in a way to our financial projections, because it just means that we have a higher sharing of our property taxes to our charter schools. So the district have 3 charter schools that were authorized. So based on their second interim submission, they are using these COLA for 22-23 and 23-24, and so their revenue is higher, and so we will be sharing more of our property taxes to them. So with a combination of this COLA plus their also projected increase in ADA over this 2-year period, it's about 1.4 million increase compared to what we projected at first interim. So for property taxes, we remain the percentage growth that we have here for taxes as a basic aid district is the same as first for interim, with the adjustment in the current year to actual P1 estimates that we got from the county controller's office. The next 2 years would be at 2%, and I'm going to show you in subsequent slide why we continue to use 2% in our projection. The rest of the funding for revenue, lottery, mandated, and all the other federal, state, and local is the same as the first interim. On the expenditure side, the RCA, the same as first interim. The significant change is on the CSA, or the classified salaries, where after first interim, there's a settlement with the CSEA. So now we are doing a retro for 2 years, 4% plus 4% for 2021 and 21-22 fiscal year. So those are now included in the second interim budget. And for the subsequent years, we are not factoring any compensation increase. But of course, we are putting in a 1.5% step on column adjustment for the subsequent year. The health and welfare is projected at 5% for the second year. And for the current year, it's based on actual staffing and their selection of their medical coverage. So this is actually a change that I made. So this health and welfare in the PowerPoint that's attached to the agenda, and the one that I shared yesterday, I changed 21-22 only to reflect current. The rest for unemployment insurance percentages, workers' comp, CalPERS and CalSTRS are the same as first interim. So the last item on the expenditure side that I wanted to show for information for the 21-22 is the inflation cost. This is also significantly higher than what we projected at first interim. So 21-22, of course, our expenditure is based on actual contracts, actual needs for each department and school sites. But I just wanted to show you what were made for the 21-22 in terms of the CPI. It's 5.78 now from 3.96. And then for the 22-23, from 2.65 to 3.69 and 2.9 from 2.36 at first interim. So for these 2 years alone, if we calculate the increase, which is just 1.5% over 2 years, that's equivalent to about $600,000 additional cost to the district. So all these 3 items will be also shown in our multi-year projection, which costs why there's a need to contribute more from our RDA funding. So on the general fund revenues, our total general fund revenues is 123.4 million. And as you can see, there's a large amount of monies on federal and state. So these were updated at second interim with current needs on the usage of our COVID funds. And of course, these the first two items are our basic aid funding based on P1. So this slide just shows the changes on the revenue side from first interim to second interim. So as you can see, there's not a significant change. So the change in revenue is about 145.6 thousand, 145,611. And if you the largest part of that is on the recalculation of our basic aid funding. So the additional funding here is due to the decline in the ADA for the charter schools. So at first interim, they're showing 1,265 ADA total for the three charters. And then now with the P1 submission of their attendance report, they're showing 1,200. So there's property taxes back to the district by that amount. The small adjustment in lottery is adjustment in our grant award. And then the small leases and rentals here is local revenues generated from rentals of facilities, like 1 day, 2 days use of our classroom facilities. There is really not much adjustment on the revenue side. Our total general fund expenditures is 138.4 million. As you can see, 73% of that is salaries and benefits, and that includes the settlement here for the CSEA. And then the rest are non-salary items. This is the 36.8% where we apply the consumer price index or the inflation cost. So here are the explanations for the changes in expenditures compared to the first interim. So 2.2 million increase in expenditure are basically these items. So the certificated, considering 400 plus FTE, these are changes in positions that we have on the position control module of our system. So that's increased by 201,000. And then this is the settlement for CSEA. So the increase here is mainly that, the CSA settlement, and it contains 2 years of retro payment for CSEA. And of course, the change in benefits is related to this increase. So that's about 1.9 million on the both on classified and employee benefits. And of course, there's part of these is also related to the certificated salary adjustments. On the books and supplies, there is a net reduction of 105,000. So what we've done at second interim is to work with the departments and sites, look over what were encumbered for their PO. We determine is that still necessary for the remainder of the year. And so those are adjustment. And so the net decrease is 105,000. And then for services and operating expenses, these are contracted services. And mainly, not all, but mainly it's an added cost for ground maintenance, leases for storage that's needed, and then some custodial services. Details of all of these are in the budget book. It's more detailed than this one, and it starts on page 13 of the budget book. The other increase with this negative 152 is actually a savings, additional money to the general fund. So the Department of Education allows the general fund to charge other programs for indirect costs. So because other programs are benefiting from the expenses incurred in the general fund, they allow us to charge the program. And so the expenditures in the child development and child nutrition services increase. So we're able to collect back in indirect costs, direct and indirect costs by 152,000. the approved indirect cost rate for Redwood City for the current year is 6.6%. Then the other big additional expenditure in the general fund is the contribution to special ed. So a special ed program increased by 1.2. And Patricia Pullen had mentioned that there's a growth in new students with IEPs. So there are additional NPS, NPA contracts that were processed after first interim by about 1.2 million. So I would like, this is added also on the slides. I just added this one slide to just show you the funding status for a special ed program. This too is in the budget book. So as you can see here, total revenues, there's no increase. This is based on SELPA allocation. So from first to second interim, we didn't receive any new information about funding for special ed programs. So there's no increase. But as I mentioned about the need for the program, it grew by 1.2, which is mainly here, the contracted services. So as you can see, the federal program's only 1.5. And this 4.9 here is coming from SELPA. It's actually funded from local property taxes. So the contribution to balance to zero is a 9.9, almost 20 million. So this slide just also show you the COVID-19 resources. This was presented at first interim. We made an update. Some of the allocations here are slightly increased, and so we have that updated. The second interim budget, we also made an adjustment on, it's slightly not significant, on the revenue as well as on the expenditure side. So assuming all of the planned expenditures for 21-22 materialize, the remaining balance for the COVID-19 resources is about 5.9 million compared to 6.1 million at first interim. So with that remaining balance, we're still going to be able to continue our plans for supporting some of the programs that we have identified that needs to continue for 2 more years or 1 more year for some of the plans, like the summer school, independent study, class size reduction, math, advanced math, and mental health programs. So all of these will still be able to fund based on a projected ending balance for the COVID-19 resources. The next slide is a very concise version of our multi-year projection. If you wanted to see details of all of these, it's also in the budget book, starting on page 34. So all the factors that I've mentioned to you are included in this revenue projection. As you can see that for the restricted programs in the out years, the balancing factor here, after considering all the contributions, all the funding, is the contribution from unrestricted to restricted. The change here compared to first interim is on the transfer of funds from RDA, from the accumulated balance here. The ongoing pass-through revenues for RDA are the same. The contributions for the 22-23 is the same as what we have at first interim. The only growth that we see here is on the 23-24 year, where this amount was increased from 8.4 million to 11.4 million, or about 3 million. And as I mentioned, the reasons for this increase in the projection would be the projected in lieu property taxes for the charter school, which, as I mentioned, is about 1.4, and then the inflation costs about $500,000, and then the increase in expenditures from the second interim. And so the contribution needed based on the assumptions that we have would be 3 million more in the 23-24 year. these assumptions and including the transfers allows the district to meet the 3% minimum reserve requirement for the current and the next 2 years. So these are the components of what those ending balances will be. And as you can see, we still meet the 3% here with a very little unassigned amounts. So the next slide, I just wanted to show you the components of the Fund 25 or the Capital Facilities Fund. In that fund, we are tracking the RDA balances that we're getting, and then the developer fees funds that we continue to receive. And that portion that we contributed to the bond projects, the remaining balance of a 10 million contribution that we did on the bond projects is going to be fully spent this year. So on the RDA portion, assuming everything remains the same when we close the year, the balance here as of June 30 is projected at 20.3 million for the RDA. So if we transfer what we have planned as shown on the MYP, the remaining balance as of 23-24 is 2.9 million. So this does not seem enough to base on our need, considering the contributions. Based on the study that's done, we still have 8 more years to collect RDA funding. So it will end after 2029-30. So this is just our projection. I know, and everyone knows, there's a lot of uncertainties. So the big factor that we will be watching for would be the property tax growth. So the reason for that 2% is this comparison that we have on actual for 2021. This is what's actually been allocated to Redwood City School District. And then we have the P1 estimates at 75.4. So that just shows a growth of 2.38% over the prior year. So we're waiting for the P2. P2 is going to be released around April 15. So hopefully it would look better. But looking at the assessed value of properties, the growth also from 2021 to 21-22 is about 4%, which is significantly lower than previous year's projection of 8% and above. So we will continue to monitor that. So it could be that our 2% assumption is too conservative. Comes the budget adoption for next year, we will make changes on our projection for property tax revenues as we know more. Hopefully we get more information from the San Mateo County Controller's Office and the Assessor's Office. The other factor also that is impacting our funding for as a basic aid district is the property tax sharing with charter schools. So compared to the data that we've used for first interim, there's a significant growth in Connect's charter school projection. This is what they have submitted to us at second interim. Connect is projected to grow from 141 to 182 next year, and then 200 ADA in 23-24. KIP, on the other hand, is showing a decline next year, but a growth in 23-24, and Rocket Ship a decline to 276. So comparing these to what we've used in our first interim projection, the amount of property taxes that we're sharing is growing, and over the 2 years, it's about 1.4 million increase. So whether this would go up higher or would decline, then we can determine what is the impact on our property tax revenues. So these charts are taken from the official LCFF calculator. And so if we are not a basic aid district, this would have been our funding in yellow. But because we are, this is what we are projecting as revenues. So overall, you can see that we are basic aid only by about 10 million, or about less than 10% of our funding compared to what other districts of our neighboring district is receiving in terms of a basic aid funding. So for the 21-22, it's not 10 million. It's significantly low. It's about 3 million less if we are comparing about 10 to 12 million additional funding. And that's because of what happened in 21-22. We get hit by 2 court litigation settlements. And so we have the Redwood City RDA versus the Department of Finance, where we have to pay back about 2 million in revenue. And then we have the Chula Vista case, which is pertaining to 2018 correction, and that's about 1 million. So there's about 3 million hit in our property tax funding for 21-22. So all of this, hopefully, we will have a more realistic projections in when we are ready to develop our budget for next year. So those are the 2 significant factors that might change our projection of what the RDA balance will be in the next 2 years. So this slide shows all of the district funds. So as you can see here, this is our ending balance for the general fund. The net deficit here for both restricted and unrestricted is about 15 million. But some of these is not really, a deficit. It's just more of spending out, like the COVID-19 resources. And then there's no significant change on the ending balance for child development. Cafeteria increased slightly because of the higher reimbursement rate for the year. And then deferred maintenance, no change. Building fund, the budget was increased by over 1 million because they are expecting to finish all of their project this year. And so they've increased their expenditure budget. So if all of these budgeted expenditures will be fully spent, then the ending balance in the building fund is about 4.7 million. And this is basically 4 million of that is the board reserve that still remain untouched at this time. And so we are in the business office in constant communication with Sarah and Don Diaz, because we're now watching the fund balance very carefully, like on a cash basis, because we are ending most of the programs and want to make sure there's no overspending there. And then the capital facilities is 23.4. Like I mentioned, the majority portion of these, the RDA balance, and very slight adjustment in the expenditure for Fund 40 here. And these are for our consultants for like the survey that was just done. So that projected ending balance is about 1.9 million. So with that, what's next for us for financial reporting? The quarterly reporting for COVID-19 stimulus funding is due again on April 15. And we are hoping to get more information from the governor's May revised budget proposal. And as I've mentioned, property tax reporting due on April 15. We hope to get more information from these. And so the next changes that you will be seeing on the 21-22 budget is when we present along with the proposed budget for next year. The LCAP and budget adoption is due to the county by July 1. I think that was the end of my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have for me.
We have any questions or comments?
I don't have any questions, but a couple comments. First of all, thank you, Priscilla, for presenting, this very complex budget in a way that's really easy to understand where the changes are and what are the driving factors behind them. It's one thing to look through the budget book and see the detail, but it's entirely different to have it come and explained, as concisely and clearly as you do it. So I really appreciate that. It's good to see that the multi-year projection is a positive certification. Of course, that's where we always want to be. But I would be amiss to not share that, I'm concerned about the structural deficit that we always see in there. We get that same feedback from the county office, like we did at the last board meeting, a concern about the structural deficit that's there and the need to draw down on funds. I'm not alarmed. We've seen this before. We see it there. And this is definitely not the right time to change any of our plans. We have so many good efforts in place right now that are particularly addressing the coming out of the COVID pandemic, which we're still in as we're wearing masks at this meeting. And then so many things addressing the real needs of the students in the district. But I did want to share that concern that, it's not going to go on like this forever. And I think, it would be a lost opportunity for us to not at least acknowledge that and make sure that we keep that top of mind. There's awesome things going on and that money is being well spent. But when you look at the projection and where everything's going, eventually we may be looking at changes. But otherwise, thank you so much for the report.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? No? Elisa, do you have any comments or questions?
Yeah, I wasn't sure if Cecilia or Janet or you had comments, but I'm happy to talk. That's okay. So Priscilla, first of all, thank you to you and your team. I know I had some questions today, and I also talked to Dr. Baker earlier in the week. There is a lot to chew on in this budget. There was in our budget that we approved, but then of course seeing the second interim and just sort of forecasting out into the future. And I think like Mike said, the good news is we do show a positive certification through the next really, this school year plus 2 more years, which is basically what we need to do. And, I think if we forecasted right now what we know, we see that we have the structural deficit. There's a lot of work to do. Of course, we've been like this for a long, long time, and it's really hard to forecast what revenues and expenses will be, 4, 5, 6 years from now. But it does look like, we have some work to do. And I know I talked to Dr. Baker that, I think next year it would be good to really start looking at some of those structural deficits. We'll have a better sense of, how all the extra stimulus money has been spent, all of that. One thing I did notice, and we had talked about previously, is that, some of the stimulus money we're using for some really amazing things, like adding the mental health support, the reading resource specialists, the advanced math, some of the electives. There's some really important things there. When I add those up, that could potentially be another, $4.8 million a year. Again, we're doing those now because we have the extra money and it's one-time money, but that was sort of one thing that popped up to me. And then one thing I just wanted to bring up, particularly for any audience members who like to do advocacy out there, I do think it's important when I look at the special ed budget. One of the ahas for me is the federal government is not living up to their promises on special ed. And when they passed the law many years ago, they promised to pay 40% of the cost of special ed. And I think, Priscilla, I sent you that today. I think I had more like, it was like 5.2% or something is what they're covering now. When I started as a board member, it was like 12 to 14%. Maybe as high as 17% is what I saw, but it's pretty clear they are not doing what they need to be doing, right? And so I think there's such an opportunity. We know that our special ed students need these services and deserve these services. So we need to figure out a way to afford those without dipping so heavily into the general fund. And so I know I'm going to double down on my advocacy efforts, but I just encourage us all to think about that, what more we can do. I figured out if they were doing their 40%, we'd be getting another $9.2 million. That's a lot of money. So yeah. And then the other thing is around PERS and STIRS. That's another opportunity for advocacy that, I know some of us are trying to talk to our state legislators and the governor about using some of the surplus funds this year to pay down our pension obligations, because again, those are required by the state, and yet they're not giving us the money we need to afford those. And if you look at those are really going up in the next couple of years. So there's a lot of opportunity, I think, that we need to think, about our own budget, but then also how we can support all the school districts in California to really get what our students deserve, right? So anyway, thank you very much. And Priscilla, I don't know if you want to comment on any of that I said, or if not, I think.
One of the things to
Thank you.
Alyssa is the state has been talking about excess funding. There's the influx of excess revenue that the state is receiving, and hopefully that they won't forget about basic aid, because right now a lot of it is put into LCFF calculator, and there are one-time monies that are distributed to all school districts, but hopefully they would also allocate some to the basic aid district, because not all basic aid districts are not needing additional fund, especially in our case. The other thing too regarding the deficit is Redwood City School District is one of the highest, or if not the highest, in terms of unduplicated pupil count. So it's really hard to implement like significant budget cuts. It has to be done through like a long year plan because of the current needs. We have high needs in the special education program. We have high unduplicated pupil percentage. So that's another challenge for Redwood City School District.
Any other comments or questions? No? Well, thank you, Priscilla, to you and your staff. I know that you guys work very hard on putting this together. And as Mike said, it's very easy for us to understand compared to some of those books that come out. You make it really easy to understand where the money's going and for that. And I know it takes a lot of time and effort to get all that done. So I appreciate all the work you and your staff have put on this. John, did you have any comments?
Of course, thank you to Priscilla. She does a fantastic job. She and her staff does on this report. My only other comment is to echo what Mike has said, and also Elisa. And Priscilla is to remember that RDA is going to terminate. It is coming to, we have about 8 years left, if I'm not mistaken, about 8 years left. And then it does not exist any longer for us. So it is a concern, and definitely it's some planning that has to be done within, the next couple of years to go in that direction to where we are not truly deficit spending as we have been, and then to also think that we do deserve to give our great employees cost of living allowance, which we have done the last 2 years, but we are not settled anything for the year coming or the year after that. So that's another thing to think about. But thank you, Priscilla.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, can I have a motion to move this item?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, Ellie?
Trustee McAvoy,
Aye.
Trustee Wells,
Aye.
Trustee Lawson,
Aye.
Vice President Marquez,
Aye.
President Diaz-Solcom.
Aye. And with that, we move on to board and superintendent reports. Mike, you want to start?
The only thing I have to report is that we visited some of the classrooms that are part of the NUA program at Clifford today. I say we because you'll hear from some of the other trustees that they did as well. And spent a couple hours just observing the classrooms and seeing the strategies at work. And then a little briefing beforehand in the library, which is a great library at Clifford. Was glad to be there. And then afterwards, went back there and debriefed with with the NUA leaders, and one of the classroom teachers was kind enough to take her PE period and talk through it with us. So great experience.
So I guess I'll just piggyback on that too, because I want to say hi to Miss Cody. I know I see you out there. So she was with us today, and I loved visiting the classrooms and seeing the just the NUA practice at work in the classrooms. The students were really engaged and collaborative with each other, and it was really neat to see just how well they can move from like their small group work to coming together as a big group, and then they go right back into their small group. Like they just know what they're doing, and you can tell that they've been practicing this for a long time. And then when one of the teachers would say, turn and talk to a neighbor, they would just immediately go into conversation. There was no question about what do we need to talk about, like who do I talk to? So I was really impressed with that, and just want to thank Dr. Baker for supporting that program too. Let's see, Elisa and I, we met to go over the feasibility study with Dr. Baker and the team. Redwood City Together. I met with my subcommittee for the NSA Forward, and we had a policy committee meeting yesterday. That's it.
Sure. So again, to piggyback on Mike and Janet, I was also there at Clifford, and again, the engagement was just amazing. And then from what the teacher mentioned is they were willing to actually go and learn about NUA, and how they are actually seeing that some of the students are actually, very expressive, and some of their topics are perhaps even more interesting that the teachers have seen in prior years. Their writing just became much better. So it's amazing. And then one of the things I do want to say publicly is if we can get all of our schools to join, it would be amazing. Even start from the little ones, because again, my thing has always been having a strong background would just help them through. And so it's just amazing to see the program. And then my other report is I was part of the budget committee as well with Maria and Priscilla and Dr. Baker. And that's it.
Lisa?
Yeah, hi. It was great to hear about NUA. Thanks for sharing. I was unable to be there today, and I was sad to miss the opportunity, but I'm going to try to get over to Clifford in the next, well, not next week because nobody will be there, but hopefully in the next couple of weeks, I can get over there and see some of this in action. So anyway, thank you for sharing that. It was really good to hear. And I agree, it would be great to see it spread even more, into more classrooms. And I know we do have in a lot of classrooms. Let's see. So I followed Janet around to a variety of meetings the last couple of weeks. And I did want to say, I think, Wendy, I don't know if you've sent them out yet, but pretty soon, board members, you'll be getting a package from the policy committee. And there's a bunch of new policies and ARs to look at for the April meeting. So we're going to send those out early, so you're not scrambling with just a couple of days to review those. And I also attended the SEPTAR meeting last night, and they had some experts on there talking about planning for the future for special ed students and, your students or children in general. And they talked about financial planning and wills and trusts. And it was really interesting to hear from them kind of some of the special considerations for parents with special needs kids that might need additional care than a typical kid. So anyway, I was really happy. Thank you, Leslie and SEPTAR, for putting that together. That was, I think, useful for parents. And then we did have the CSBA Legislative Action Week last week. We did it virtually instead of one day. It was over multiple days. And I think all of you got some information on that today in the CSBA email. And that's it for me. Thanks.
Well, all the meetings I went to have been mentioned. Dr. Baker?
I just have one, and that was, because everything has been mentioned, I was at MIT this afternoon for a couple hours to introduce Susana Garcia, who will be the new principal, and she met with staff, and it was a really good meeting, very good meeting. So very pleased to have her at the helm of that school next year, beginning next year.
Okay, moving right along. 12.1, information of San Mateo County Investment Fund, February 2020. Do we have any questions or comments on that? No. Item 13.1, correspondence. I think I got some emails from parents. 14.1, possible other business suggested items for future agendas.
So as you all know, and we have two board members that participate in the North Star Forward Committee, we continue to make progress on our next steps. So I need another board meeting on April 20th. So that means we will have one on the 6th, one on the 13th, one on the 20th, and one on the 27th. The 20th will be a special session, and this will be a session on where we are with the committee's work and what some of their highlights and some of their thoughts are about moving forward with North Star Forward and what it should look like. So want to have that discussion with you, and at the same time make sure that all public is aware of it, so the public can also give their input. We will put all the information together that we receive prior to that meeting. I think we have, let's see, this is the 6th. We come back, we have another meeting on the 7th to work with the larger group and look at all the different ideas that they have come up with in committee to kind of look through them, determine if some are similar and put them together, discuss them with the group, and then bring them to a discussion with the board with public input. So the idea is that when the packet goes out on that Friday prior to the 20th board meeting, it will have the information that has been collected from the committee's work that will give us and yourselves an insight of where the thinking is at that time, where they would like it to be, and for us to have a discussion, and then also involve the public. So I am suggesting that we meet at 6:15, so that I get here, and probably be from 6:15 to 8:30.
Okay.
Questions?
Is that okay with everyone?
Yeah.
Okay. Gosh, thank you. So 15.1, changes to the board agenda schedule besides the one you just mentioned. There are none. Okay. So with that, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, Lily?
Trustee McAvoy,
Aye.
Trustee Wells,
Aye.
Trustee Lawson,
Aye.
Vice President Marquez,
Aye.
President Diaz-Solca.
Hi, thank you, everybody. Good night.